1948 to 1950, the world's most famous battleship was at sea as a training ship. When North Korean troops marched into South Korea, she was quickly ordered back to Norfolk to be loaded with supplies and live ammunition. The Missouri would be going back to work as a battleship. In time, she would be joined by her three sisters of the Iowa class, the Iowa, Wisconsin, and New Jersey. All four reactivated from mothballs for wartime duties to protect the fast carriers and bombard North Korean positions ashore. September 1950, the battleship Missouri has fought through two hurricanes, arriving too late for support of the American invasion at Incheon. Now, equipped with a helicopter for spotting, her big guns speak once again. Just before Christmas 1950, the Communist Chinese came into the war on the side of the North Koreans. 7 Chinese divisions converged on a single division of American Marines at Chosin Reservoir. The Marines fought their way to the tiny port city of Hungnam. The Missouri was there. Lee Royal was aboard.
We fired night and day. It was a warning to the Chinese and North Koreans not to interfere with the Marines coming off the beach.
Hungnam was in flames. The American Marines, along with North Korean civilians, their goats and chickens, had escaped. The last of the UN soldiers had set charges in the ammunition dump to keep it from the approaching Chinese. As the Missouri weighed anchor to leave the harbor, the earth shook with a gigantic explosion. While the Missouri was steaming in Korean waters, her sister ship, the New Jersey, was being recommissioned. By May, she was stationed off the North Korean port city of Kansong. At 5 in the morning of May 20, the guns of the New Jersey were fired in anger for the first time since 1945. After 6 months of operations off the coast of Korea, the New Jersey is relieved by her sister ship, the Wisconsin. And for 6 months in 1952 by the Iowa. Before the war is over, all 4 Iowa-class battleships will have seen action in Korean waters. After Korea, there were diplomatic cruises, training missions, and NATO maneuvers. But in November 1957, the Wisconsin completed her final cruise and followed her 3 Iowa-class sisters into the mothball fleet. For the first time since the 1890s, the United States was without even one active battleship. Throughout the first half of the politically charged 1960s, America became increasingly involved in a war in Southeast Asia. Perhaps a battleship could save American lives. But the battleships of the Iowa class slept in mothballs. Then, in 1967, the word came down: bring back the New Jersey. Within months, she would be guided into dry dock at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, where her great hull would leave the water for the first time in a decade. The men of the shipyard had done this job before, some of them when she was first built in the early 1940s. From scaffolding high in the superstructure and in spaces below, the men of the Philadelphia yard would bring the ship back to life, updating her electronics for the Navy of the 1960s. Finally, after nearly a year of work, the reborn New Jersey steams triumphantly to sea. On September 29, 1968, the world's only active battleship arrived off the coast of Da Nang, South Vietnam, ready for work. Captain of the New Jersey at the time was the colorful J. Edward Snyder.
the commanding officer of the field hospital said that he was taking incoming. Incoming means that the North Vietnamese were shelling his hospital while they were trying to do operations. And would I consider lobbing a shell over his hospital just for the heck of it to try to see if that would stop them? And I said, well, I'd be perfectly willing to do that. Let me take a look at what the situation is. And of course, one of my officers said, you can't fire over your own troops. And I said, they're not troops, they're the hospital. He said, well, that's worse. I said, oh, shut up, we're going to do it anyhow. So we would stand up there and between the hours of 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, fire randomly 2 shells directly over the hospital and have the explosion go several thousand yards over the hospital. And not one time during the 30 days we did that did the hospital take incoming from the Vietnamese.
Throughout her tour in Vietnam, the New Jersey was a constant object of attention from the press. On one occasion, a reporter approached Captain Snyder and asked about the ship's real effectiveness.
I said to him, well, why don't you ask the people we're supporting, for heaven's sakes? They're the people that know whether I'm effective or not, or whether the ship's effective. So he goes ashore, he comes back, and he shows it to me, and he plays me the tape. And the last line of the tape was, if it hadn't been for the Big J, they would have zapped our ass.
By June of 1969, the New Jersey was back home in friendly waters. And only 6 months later, on a damp and chilly day in Bremerton, Washington, an old story was being repeated once again. For the second time, the New Jersey had been consigned to the mothball fleet. Her new captain, Robert Penniston, voiced the feelings of many when he said, "The hour cometh, and now is to say farewell. Rest well, yet sleep lightly, and hear the call." Then in the fall of 1979, Iranian militants seized America's embassy in Tehran. The Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and the United States was perceived by some as weak, unwilling, or unable to act. But by 1981, America had a new president, and Ronald Reagan's Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, had new ideas to build an enlarged fleet organized around aircraft carriers and recommissioned Iowa-class battleships. By summer, President Reagan had signed the new defense legislation, and all 4 of the Iowa-class ships were on their way back. They would be transformed, modernized with the very latest of weaponry. No longer would their offensive action be limited to the range of their historic 16-inch guns. 8 box launchers for 32 Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range of 1,500 miles, and 4 quadruple canister launchers for 16 close-in Harpoon anti-ship missiles were mounted in the superstructures. 4 Vulcan Phalanx weapon systems would provide defense against enemy aircraft and incoming missiles. New communication systems, air search radar, and improved living spaces equipped the Iowas for the 1980s. To replace and refit what was required of the original equipment no longer manufactured, the Navy secured tons of items from America's museum battleships, the North Carolina, Alabama, and Massachusetts. The 1982 recommissioning of the New Jersey cost $326 million. More than 3 times what it cost to build her in 1941. But to Secretary Lehman, intent on creating a new Navy, symbolic of America's status as a world power, she was more than worth it. By 1983, the New Jersey is bright and new once again. She cruises as the centerpiece of a new battle group. She is part of a peacekeeping force off the coast of Lebanon. For 6 months, she cruises the coast and shells Syrian gun positions ashore. In time, she is joined at sea by the USS Iowa and her sister ships, Missouri and Wisconsin.
Ralston, what do you have on Skunk about 5 degrees off the port bow?
Yes, sir. It's Skunk India, bearing 255, 21,000. Course 075.
Evaluator, I have an update on the Kenda.
Very well.
All stations report, ready for call for fire.
All stations report and ready to call for fire.
Report, ready to call for fire.
On a routine training mission in the spring of 1989, as the crew of the Iowa prepares to fire the center 16-inch gun in number 2 turret, something goes terribly wrong. 47 sailors are killed in a tragedy that to this day has not been fully explained. And as the Cold War comes to